I think Joel got to the point of seeing the work that these men were doing. I know you said they were preaching the word, and it was probably for safety reasons as well, because you know that he was setting his sights upon Syria, and as you talked about last week, we had to change his mind. Why did he have to change his mind? There was people, a plot to harm him, and I asked the question, why is this happening? Why would they do that here? Why did he set his eyes upon Syria? And as you noted, and as we've noted in the two missionary journeys that we've seen, he goes back to Syria, and as you learned, reminded yourself, what city was that? Where he started his missionary journeys on those places. Antioch of Syria. Could Tyre be in Syria? That's where he lands. He doesn't go to Antioch of Syria, but he goes to Syria. And we'll see that he's not changed his plans about going to Syria. He had to change them because of a plot, and he ends up going to Syria. He lands in Tyre, goes up to Jerusalem, Caesarea, and to Jerusalem. As we see, this third journey ended, but it ended with him being captured in Jerusalem. Then he makes his way to Rome. So the question is, what were they doing? And I think everything that was said in the class last week was good. But this is where the epistles come in. And what might they be doing that these 7 men were involved with? And what would they be doing that you might be more specific at the time of this happening? Yeah, they're preaching the word. They're going in together so they could be protected, and that's true. David, you had your hand up.
Well, you mentioned 2 things I would say: preaching and maybe protecting Paul.
What might they be protecting? Paul would write in his 20. He's written the 1 Corinthians from Ephesus. He will write a letter from Philippi, the Galatians, and 2 Corinthians. And he's involved in, at this time, 57, 58 AD, of writing letters. And what did he say to the people in Corinth? You know, here we're taking the weekly contributions, so no collection be made when I come. And that is for the saints in Judea, the needy saints in Judea. He writes 2 Corinthians, follow through with your plan. He said the churches of Macedonia have already given greatly because that's so. You have men from Macedonia. You have men from Galatia. You have 7 men. What have they been doing? Preaching the word, but they've been collecting money to help the needy in the saints. Because when he writes Romans after 2 Corinthians, notice what he's saying here about the gift. Romans, the 16th chapter, and verse 25, I think we can see there, where he's praying. Let's see if we get this. Romans, the 15th chapter. I go into Jerusalem, verse 25, ministering unto the saints. Well, we're going to end up, when he sets sail for Syria, he goes to Jerusalem, and that's where he's going to deliver the money. Where did he get the money? I think he's doing it right now. These 7 men from all the different places where they've been collecting the money are now with him, and they're going to be accompanying him as he takes that money to Jerusalem. I go to Jerusalem, ministering to the saints, for it has been the good pleasure of Macedonia and Achaia to make a certain contribution for the poor among the saints that are at Jerusalem. They have the money. I'm writing this letter after 2 Corinthians. We have the money, and I just hope it'll be accepted when I go there. And that's what he asked for those saints to pray for him. So I think because when we say there was a man from Derbe, Gaius from Derbe. Why Derbe? Derbe is in Asia Minor. It's in Galatia. And then you have people from Macedonia. What have they been doing? And you know, the only way they didn't have credit cards and things like that. They had to carry weights of silver. And they distributed among themselves for protection. So the point is, they wanted for protection. Well, what are they protecting? I suggest to you they're protecting the money. And someone met them in Troas. He's making his move now. He goes way out of his way to escape the harm. He goes up to Philippi, probably to encourage that church again. As you stated last week, the idea of confirming the churches. He did that every chance he had. But a plot was set out. Maybe they got word they got money on him. I don't know. It wasn't just to harm him, yet it was, because he's going to accompany that. The churches had selected the men that were going to accompany that money with Paul to Jerusalem. So when he writes the book of Romans, he writes it in, as we go into chapter 20, as he's in Greece and so forth, he's already written from Ephesus, 1 Corinthians. Now, that may be the background. It sure does fit with the letters being written, of the time frame in which it has been written, and now the history that is unfolding before our very eyes. So, yes, preaching the word, confirming the message. Yes, wanting to go in numbers to be protected. But also, I think they've been collecting money from their different places, just like Paul had written to them, as he had earlier had written, and he continues to do so as Acts the 20th chapter opens up, when he comes to Greece and spends 3 months, time to write a letter. And now it's being done in Romans. The Roman letter seems to be thinking, I've got it, and I'm coming. Any comments on that? Questions? I think it's something to consider. So I think that is a major reason why they were involved in naming them, a group of them. Why are they all going with him at this particular time? All right, let's look at question number 4. For what purpose did the disciples in Troas meet on the first day of the week? To break bread. Breaking bread. Acts the 2nd chapter, that can be breaking bread from house to house, and it's called food. Lord's Supper is never called food. Breaking bread is a terminology that can be determined by the context, will be that which is important to take. The problem in Corinth, they were really considering the Lord's Supper to be like a common meal. If you're hungry, where do you eat? At home. You're coming together. The Lord's Supper is not for that purpose, but it's breaking bread. And when the Lord broke bread, when he instituted the Lord's Supper, what did he say? Take, eat, this is my what? It's my body. It's given for you. This do in remembrance of me. He took the cup metonymy. Did he drink glass or plastic? No. What's in the cup? It's the fruit of the vine. It ain't wine. It's fruit of the vine. Your Bible says sometimes people say, well, I'm going to drink some wine. I remember in Lubbock, the church I was preaching at, there was a big problem in that little community, and they'd had a division because someone wanted to bring wine on the Lord's table. We had to deal with that. And we realized it's fruit of the vine. Why do we have to be alcoholic to take the Lord's Supper? Have alcohol to do that. So it's the fruit of the vine, but when he took the cup, and they drank the cup, and just like they drank from the well of the Samaritan woman, we all drank from this well. What, you got the well and drank it? You drank the contents. And so metonymy, figures of speech, are in our Bibles to have the proper understanding. It's the fruit of the vine. What did it represent? His blood was shed for the remission of sins. And they remember that. Now, this is the only place in our New Testament that we have some guidelines of when the Lord's Supper was to be partaken. And what is it? First day of the week. In other countries, the first day of the week is not Sunday. In the calendars in Eastern Europe, it's not Sunday, because Sunday is the Sabbath in Europe, because of the influence of the Catholic Church and all those things. We're going to keep this. That's the Christian Sabbath. So Sunday's the 7th day, and then Monday we're going to start the first day. So you had to do some teaching there on the first day of the week. It was after the Sabbath, which was the 7th day, and there, it's that the Beatles song, there's not 8 days a week. So what do we start with? We start on the first day of the week, which is indeed a Sunday. And they did that on that day. Now, is that a pattern that we are to follow? Is the Lord's Supper Do we have patterns that we're to follow?
Example.
Yes, and it's an example, but is that form a pattern? They also ate in the third law. Is that a pattern? We've got to be in the third law? When Jesus instituted, it was in the upper room. Is that something we have to follow? Well, no, we have to follow that. Well, if you have, because we realize we could be at, that's not part of the Lord's Supper, that's where they were. This we're going to see, they were gathering at night because they had lights. And he preaches to midnight. So they had gathered in the evening time, and he prolongs his speech to that time. Is that the pattern that we're to follow? And there's a lot of people, they have gotten away from the pattern of the Lord's Supper by not taking the Lord's Supper when coming together. And therefore, I'm asking, is it all right to take it on any other day of the week? I say it'd be pretty meaningful because he instituted the Lord's Supper on a Thursday. We remember his death. He died on Friday. You know, I think I could get into the Lord's Supper if we would just realize there's no pattern to the Lord's Supper. I can take it in our homes. I can take it on the ship. I don't have to be in a local church to partake it. There's no pattern. Is that where you want to go, brethren? Some were heading that way because they take away part of the pattern that we see. Realize the upper room was that which they had. It was cheap. It was something that could be provided. We have a place to provide on the ground floor. But the day in which he was partaken, what's interesting, that's not the day he died. That's the day he was what? And yet the Lord's Supper has nothing to do with his resurrection. I hear it all the time on the table. Thank you. No, it doesn't represent his resurrection. We proclaim his death, period. That's what we're doing in that Lord's Supper. But we know he's coming back again, don't we? And that necessitated the resurrection. And so we are involved in coming, realizing he's coming again. What we're doing, we're remembering his death till he comes again. And we'll continue to do that till he comes. And is the bread, unleavened bread, is that part of the pattern? Well, there's no pattern to the Lord's Supper. What we see, what is always being part of the partaking of the Lord's Supper and what we think about, that is what we're to do. It's not to be a common meal. And it is done when we come together to break bread. Coming together. And it's in Troas, it's in Corinth, it's always in the local church. And therefore, that's where we have it. And we don't do it on Zoom. We don't do it online. We don't have a little gathering in our home and you gather in our home and we're going to take it together. We want to. Why can't we do it on Thursday? Why can't we do it on Friday? No pattern. And what we see, we want to follow what Jesus said, and he was resurrected upon that, and that made his death very important. Without a death, there'll be no resurrection. Without a resurrection, there'll be no forgiveness of sins. His death would be void. So that's what we do, and I don't think anybody has a problem with that.
Okay.
Yes.
Some say there was no located church in Troas. They justify themselves by saying, well, it was just a group of people came together. It wasn't in the church coming together.
That's not true.
How would you refute that?
Well, here was a traveling group, but they met with another group. These people have been traveling, but they met with the brethren in Troas, and their practice was continually, that was their practice in the present tense of meeting on the first day of the week. That traveling group was not part of Troas, but there were people in Troas, brethren and disciples in Troas, that did meet regularly on the first day of the week. Disciples were gathered together on the first day of the week to break bread. That was their present tense practice. It wasn't that, hey, we showed them Troas, let's get together and have Lord's Supper in a motel. These group met with the church, and they were part of that gathering that evening. And that'd be my answer. Is that Paul and them didn't form the church. And I've had people on Zoom that are trying to, I guess, go away from that and say, well, tell me how do you find a local church? How do you determine a local church? And I asked, have you ever had trouble finding a local church? Have you ever had trouble finding a local church? I just don't know. Well, there's a group of disciples meeting here. They let me have a sign there, and church meets here. I've never had any problem with that. So why are you making a problem? That sometimes we can't determine what a local church is. So therefore we can have just a group of people come. All of those things are trying to justify what we want to do. And yes, upper room is not determining how we worship and so forth. It's not changing anything. But the day in which we do that, when people say there's no pattern to the Lord's Supper, then why can't we have good food instead of unleavened bread? And why can't we do it on Thursday? You know, don't get in the mode. We're doing it on Sunday, Thursday, and Friday. We got some meaning in all of that. And I can see people rationalizing that. But that doesn't make it true. And so we begin to see that was indeed their purpose. Now, question number 5. Paul partook of the Lord's Supper in Troas on Saturday night, Sunday morning, or Monday morning. You don't have to answer that. None of them are right, as far as I'm concerned. Saturday night, why is that set forth there? Because it was evening time. And forget the problem right now. He preaches till midnight and then takes the Lord's Supper afterwards, so we have to change that in order to get right. But ignore that for a moment. The point is, we gathered on the evening, and the Jews would call that the first day of the week. Why would the Jews call that the first day of the week? Our Saturday night. What's that? It's how they tell time. So how are they telling time? No. Why is evening when they gather? And that's the first day of the week. According to Jewish tradition, when God created the heavens and the earth, there was evening, there was morning, and one day. And they determined from the beginning that God has set time from the idea it starts in the evening, and it is evolved and going that whole time until the evening of the next day. You have your 24 hours. Evening, morning. Is that the way you operate? Oh, we don't operate that way. And I don't think God did either in Genesis 1. Turn there with me for a moment. I'm going to spend some time on this because there's a lot of confrontation about it these days. And I wanted just to look at how we read the Scriptures. And I want us to think about the idea of distinction between daylight and darkness. So that's how things begin. How were things before God said, let there be light? What was it like? Was it light, dark, gray, what? Dark. It was dark. So already you got the dark in. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was waste and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So look over here, Atlantic Ocean, or wherever the ocean is going to be, it's dark. It says dark all over. Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. So light, which is not the sun's light, that would be created later, but light, distinguishing from the darkness. And God saw that the light was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God said, called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning, one day. What interrupted total darkness, and before there was indeed evening? Light interrupted it. Let there be light. All of a sudden, there was light. And then there comes the evening time, and then the next morning starts a new day. It didn't start at evening. It starts at daylight. Now we're getting close to how we live. Maybe. But the point is how this is starting from this point, is determining how we as Christians have to determine what our time of day is. And so it's evening. That's when the first day of the week starts. And you're ignoring that a man that was so tired in the evening time, what he's been doing all day. And he have a day that started before you say the first day of the week starts? And I want us to think in terms of daylight and darkness. Jesus did. In John 11, to encourage his brethren, we need to be busy, involved in doing what we can for the Lord, because the night cometh we can't work. He said, are there not, how many hours in a day? Y'all need to wake up. Well, there's 24 hours in a day. I know, but how many hours in a day did Jesus say? 12. What's that? Maybe 12 hours of sunlight. 12 hours of darkness. Day, night. Light interrupted darkness, then came the evening, and then the morning started a new day. And you begin to realize at that point, every time frame, Romans were looking at time at midnight. We kind of follow that. Jews were looking at time, well, in the evening. Why were they, we talk about, well, in the evening time is when they had the Passover. Why that? What, is that determined? That was the first, that's when day started? And we're not going into all of those details, but it was the day that the evening time is when they were going to prepare that. They were going to eat it that night, because tomorrow would be a new day, daylight. And I want us to think in terms like that. And as you go through your daily Bible reading, you'll come across phrases between the evenings. Something happened between the evenings. Well, as the afternoon is lowering and the nighttime is coming between the evenings, daylight, darkness still fits there. And all the things that happen in the Old Testament of dealing with time, it fits with that harmony that we're talking about. So what happens is that brethren want to take the Lord's Supper today on a Saturday night. Let's do the pattern. Our Saturday night in their mind was indeed the first day of the week. And yet we say they partook of it on the first day of the week. Well, the problem is midnight comes, and if you're doing it Roman time, when do they partake of the Lord's Supper? Paul preaches to midnight. And I may be wrong in how I reinterpret this, but how would it be general? I think he got so tired, Eutychus fell out the window, and Paul hovered over him with his body, and that wasn't real weird. Like the prophet Elijah did that, showing compassion and so forth, and brings him. He's not dead; he's alive. They bring him back up the room, and then they broke what? There's a definite article with that. They broke the bread. Well, we can't partake of it on the first day of the week, so another view would be that's already Monday. So was it Monday morning? They broke the bread. If you follow the progression here, and you're going to have to put things together if you don't, did Eutychus fall out before he reached midnight to preach, and he came back and preached to midnight, or did they already take the Lord's Supper? And this is a what? This is what it changes to. Breaking bread becomes a what? They had dinner. See, they already took the Lord's Supper before it got midnight. And so this is just a common meal. Well, they didn't just break bread, they broke the bread. And what's been the whole purpose of coming and waiting 8 days? Paul waited a week so he could stay with so he could be with the brethren of the church in Troas and partake of it. It was that important first day of the week to break bread. And now this definite article, which emphasizes something, it could emphasize you had a good meal, had a common meal. But a lot of times when that happens, they just break bread on ship. This is the bread. They broke the bread. And I think that's the Lord's Supper. And I don't want to change things because it didn't work with my scenario, my agenda. I don't have an agenda. But you begin to realize, well, it was that Monday morning. If you tell Roman time, in our time, we're into the morning hours according to Roman time. So we're looking at Jewish time, we're looking at Roman time. And was it Sunday morning? Morning time. Was it daylight time? It was evening. So let's say days begin with sun up, and then and the nighttime begins with sundown. Very simple. Why would they be meeting at night? The first day of the week had already had its daylight period, and it was going into those 12 hours of night period. And you look at the history, some people were slaves that were Christians. Sometimes you could have a large enough room for a gathering at evening time, not in the daytime. And it could be the time when they could have that and they worked all day, and while people might fall asleep, listening to a sermon that is prolonged till midnight. That makes sense to me. And if it is the Lord's Supper, it's not daylight yet. We don't have to look at Roman time and set that, or Jewish time and set that in there. When God had instituted daylight and darkness, there's 12 hours in a day. There's also 12 hours at night. Because you never read about watches in the daytime. It's the 4 watches at what time? Night. 4 times 3 is 12. That concluded, that was a day. And so after midnight doesn't change the fact. They took the Lord's Supper after midnight, but it wasn't Monday yet. And it wasn't Sunday morning as we look at it our time. And so it's got to be our Saturday night. It was the first day of the week. That's what was important. And to me, that all harmonizes. And I don't have to change things. And well, you are ignoring Roman time. I don't want to ignore Roman time when there's no other way of harmonizing Scripture. Let me give you an example. In John, the 19th chapter, let's see what verse. John 19 and verse 14. Now remember, this is in a setting of Romans and Jewish law, and the Romans, I can see this being Roman time. But John says it was preparation of the Passover, and it was about the 6th hour. And he saith unto the Jews, Behold your king. They therefore cried out, Away with him, crucify him. And so here's the beginning. It is indeed the 6th hour. Well, the 6th hour from Roman time would be 6 o'clock in the morning. That fits with the affairs of his resurrection, because in Mark we see some time frames in which Jesus was crucified. Turn with me to Mark 15:33. It was the 6th hour which come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. He's on the cross already. I thought it's 6th hour, and he's been now delivered up to the Jews. What harmonizes that? Well, here it was Jewish authorities under Roman government, maybe looking at Roman time. 6 o'clock in the morning would be good. Mark 15:25, and it was the 3rd hour, and they crucified him. 9 o'clock in the morning. You're doing the 3rd hour. That would fit. When the 9th hour came in verse 33, the whole land was dark till the 9th hour, and that's when he cried a loud voice and gave the go. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What's that? Daylight time. It's starting at 6 in the morning. So there's times in the New Testament where the idea of where you tell time, Roman time, would be would be the one in charge, because that's how the judicial system would be working. If you have that be Roman time, and then all these other times that we're looking at as the daylight hours, it all harmonizes. But what's underwriting this is not how Romans going to determine their time, and John records that way at the end of the first century. But it's telling us this is all consistent with daylight, darkness, 12 hours, and the day beginning with the morning, and the day ends, and then we start a new day the next morning. It harmonizes. Now, this has been something interesting to me, dealing with people who believe that I don't understand why they can't take the Lord's Supper on Sunday night. If I've got a pattern, there's one right there. The first day of the week is evening time. But see, the evening time starts a new day. That's because that's the way God wanted us to tell time. And I'm arguing, I don't agree with the premise that starts it all off. And what I'm saying is that looking at it this way, you don't have contradictions. You appreciate the context, but you don't try to change things to make things fit because of maybe false premise that starts. But let's talk about, when was Jesus resurrected from the dead? We won't go into a lot of details, but by the time the sun was rising, people came. You have a dawn period before the sun rises. You got a new day beginning to start. Jesus has already been raised from the dead when the women come on that occasion. That's already taken place. So that's the morning time in which Jesus was raised from the dead. Everybody, I know, agrees with that. And it was indeed the first day of the week. It was the day after the Sabbath. So it was the first day of the week. When did Jesus meet with his disciples? And a week before they met with Thomas, in John the 20th chapter, when did he meet with them? Verse 19 of John 20, when therefore it was evening on that day. That starts a new day. That's Jewish way of looking at it. Whoa. On that day, it was evening time, and it was still the first day of the week. When was Jesus raised? Early on the first day of the week. Well, that was morning time. This is evening time. We didn't start a new day. Why don't you? You believe that every evening is a start of a new day. Got a Jewish time. That's the way God did from the beginning. And I'm just saying, I question that. And realize here is something that harmonizes. No. In the daylight period, we have the beginning of the first day of the week. And when evening comes, we're still in the first day of the week. We haven't started a new day. We're finishing the 24-hour span. And that's what he does. He meets with them on the first day of the week when the doors were shut. That's a big problem. When you think, well, it starts a new day in the evening time. Evening to morning is the first day. Why is it evening? Because he interrupts darkness with light, and it turns to evening time, and then it comes around, there comes the morning the next day. There's your new day. And that, I've been through the Old Testament. I've done this work. And I have not found one time where that understanding contradicts how God is revealing time in his Bible. And we can don't we mess around with time in our lives? Something happened on the East Coast, that's their time. Well, it's not my time. And we work with that. Why is it midnight with the Romans? Well, it's the middle of the nighttime period. And it's the middle of the daytime period. That's where we're going to tell time. There's still daylight and dark, and it's still 12 hours in a day, sunlight, 12 hours a night. Start with that concept. And then as you read through, you'll see evening to evening. For example, the idea of the Day of Atonement. At evening, they were to start doing something. And it would be evening till evening. And what you find is that on the 9th day, they were to start their not eating, fasting. Then on the 10th day was a Sabbath day, in which they were to, worship God and offer their offerings. And then the evening, the next day, they were to continue through the evening part, and they were to fast then. Evening to evening, wasn't telling time, well, that's how they tell time. No, 9th day, they're not eating. The 10th day, they're not eating. And you finish the 10th day of that. And then what happens? You go to sleep. And you wake up the next morning and you don't have to fast. That's not an issue. It's evening to evening. It's between the evenings. That's how God tells time. That doesn't prove that. What we find, new days start when the morning comes, on the morrow. And you'll see, that's the morning time. Paul discoursed till midnight, got interrupted with but they were able to bring Eutychus back up in the upper room and partake of the Lord's Supper. And when did they do? They continued talking and visiting one another till what? Break of day. That new day. There's your Monday morning. And we can work with, I think John 19 is one that definitely is looking at it from the standpoint of the judicial side, which would be Roman time. Now, I've said all that. Any questions you might have or comments? Traditional Jews look at that as how God has instituted time. But read a little deeper and you'll find there are a lot of Jews that don't hold that position. They hold a position of what I'm seeing. And I'm ready to test it. It's been tested enough in the last few months. And I think, to me, it harmonizes. And then they don't have an answer why it's evening on that day. And that's not a new day. It's still the first day of the week. And that's something I think people need to deal with, to be honest with the scriptures. I know it's time, so you can't talk, but you can. You have a question before we close? Okay, thank you.